Let's see here. Okay, let's try again. Good morning, Alberta freedom fighters and patriots. I have to say that the struggle continues. We're on lockdown, and this morning that's what I want to talk about is the lockdown and the problems that that's causing. I listened to Premier Kenney on Daniel Smith's show on Monday, and I have to say I was very concerned at where our government officials and our health officials are going. And they talk about the numbers, but only the numbers that scare us, only the numbers that scare us into believing that the lockdowns are the best way to travel. We need to be locked down in order for the good of society. We need to do our part. If we go out, we're being selfish. I just I can't believe that we're in this situation. And when I actually listen to people who are running a restaurant, I listen to people that are running hairdressing stores, physical fitness people. One of the problems with socialism and these individuals that stand up and they put out this big long accolade that, oh, it's our duty, it's our sacrifices are for the good of society, that we need to do this for the masses. And I just believe that that's false. What we need to do is protect the individuals. And when we use numbers and we talk about society as a whole, what we actually do is lose touch of the individuals, and they become a silent tree that's fallen in the forest, never to be heard again. And they're ignored. And when we continue to hear every day the number of cases, the number of hospital beds, the number of ICU beds, it's to me out there purely to terrorize the individuals and to continue to push on the lockdown. And we see what's happening in Ontario, Quebec, and other areas that they continue to squeeze harder and harder. And I'm sorry, but this virus is out. And now we have one from England, a variant. We have one from Africa. And I was told last night there's a new one that's in Japan. And historically, we've had the flu season. The government initiated flu shots. Then they went to free flu shots. And every year we've lost thousands of people to the flu. It's always a tragedy to lose somebody, but what we've done now is drawn this line in the sand and said, well, we can't do that. We have to stop this. And in order to stop the flu, we just need to lock people down. And they've tried it around the world. It's interesting. They say that the lockdown in China was the only successful one, that Wuhan is back to complete normal life. People are partying, going out to concerts, doing all the things that we used to do. And it seems like life is good in Wuhan, but the rest of the world, we're struggling. It's really sad that for years, what the big push has been is that mental health is that unspeakable problem that we have. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about this morning. I talked to one individual whose wife works in the mental health unit. They're maxed out. People aren't able to get the mental health that they need. The workers, the stress on the workers is just enormous. The frontline workers, the fact that we've changed our protocol in the hospital, that if you've been exposed in the schools and somebody in your group has tested positive, and again, they don't ever tell you whether, no, this person not only tested positive, but they're symptomatic. We're not told that, but they continue to shut down workers, the paramedics. We talked about them last week and how much stress was on there, that 25% of the paramedics in Calgary were off on stress leave or exposure, and it's compounding the problem. And the thing that's most important for me and what we need to change is about reporting the numbers and that fear mongering, because what they don't report are the other numbers. And to say that today, whether 3 or 10 or 12 people died of COVID, they don't say, by the way, 75% of those people are in senior care facilities. They never say that 50% of those people who died have do not resuscitate. And I don't know the numbers, but I'm just saying that we don't receive the numbers. and not having the context of the full numbers is very problematic, and it is causing stress. And we don't have the numbers on that. Another individual told me yesterday that their friend is a friend of a coroner, and the number of people that are dying is extreme. And again, I can't verify these things. And again, this is the problem. We want the numbers. We need the numbers so we can put it in context. And I was told that one day, I'm not sure how many days ago in Edmonton, but the coroner there went to 12 suicides in one day. Premier Henshaw, we need you to report the numbers. How many people are dying from suicide every day in Alberta? How many family violence calls are there? How many phone calls are coming in on the kids' helpline? How many numbers are coming in the mental facilities? How many the women's shelters and the family shelters? How many people are coming into those? How many people are declaring bankrupt every day? How many people have lost their jobs? Again, from Revenue Canada, what's the monthly deductions, the employment deductions that are going into Ottawa every month? Are they going up? Are they going down? What's the stability? But going back to the numbers, I found it fascinating that according to the premier and his science advisors around him and his health officials, that they've and again, I'm being a little bit facetious here and mocking a bit, and I feel it's appropriate here, but they've figured out how this virus is being transmitted now, and that's why they're able to pinpoint and tell you which facilities need to be closed and which ones can be open. And it's okay to be in Costco and Walmart and walking by, because you're not going to get the virus when you walk by somebody. But if you sit and visit somebody for 15 minutes, and again, whether that's on public transportation, but again, they haven't shut that down. We just wear a mask and they say that'll protect us, but it doesn't. What it does protect us from is from a high viral load. If someone was to spit and land in your eye or on your hand, and then you put it in your mouth or whatever else, and yes, there's a viral load, and the mask does reduce that. But they say that if you're sitting in a restaurant and you're eating with somebody and you're around that person for 15 minutes, that's the line, 15 minutes, that's how the virus is being passed around. And so therefore, we can't go to a restaurant and sit down and eat, because we're not moving around and we're actually in contact with that same person for 15 minutes. We can't do physical fitness training, even one-on-one. It's unbelievable that two people can't come in. They can be 10, 15, 20 feet apart in a facility, but nope, we're going to shut those down. Hairdressing, yes, the person standing behind and there, but the point that is so critical to me is that those people that are afraid of it and fearful, they don't need to go get their hair cut. It's not like the command is that, oh, you must go and work out with a physical fitness person for 30 minutes a day, or you must go and get your hair cut, every 2 weeks, or you must go out to eat in a restaurant. And one of the reasons why society, in my opinion, has flourished and done so well in the free countries is because people are actually free to flow and choose and do. If you want to go out to eat, you can. And even during this pandemic, the government's job is to give us the information. And it's always interesting to me when you have to go and appear in court, when you swear an oath, is to tell the truth and the whole truth. And we're not getting the whole truth if we're even getting the truth. And the numbers that they continue to just I don't know, scream at us day after day are fearful numbers. And again, I was listening to a doctor's wife last night, and it was very interesting for her to say, if you go back and you watch Dr. Henshaw back in the early days, they had the exact same fear mongering when it was 20 cases, when it was 40 cases, 60 cases. Now we're at 800 cases or 1,800 cases. And though the case levels have changed, the fear mongering has not. It's just as scary back in the start, back in April, when 20 people were calling or were testing positive, versus now where we have hundreds or thousands. And it's just wrong. and they're using the numbers to hurt individuals. I was speaking to another grandfather, and when he goes to see his 9-year-old grandson, and yes, I guess they're breaking the code, but if you're in isolation and you have your cohorts and you're going to visit family and stuff, um, you know, they absolutely say that this is safe. And again, before Christmas, I said, look, if we lock down for 2 weeks, there's no reason why individuals and families couldn't get together for Christmas because they've isolated and they're not sick. But oh no, it's very interesting that they keep putting on these 4-week ones. And this time, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but they continue with 4 weeks. And you have to ask, why is that? Well, I'm not sure, except for the fact that obviously the shutdown isn't working, and this so-called 2 weeks and this hard lockdown, which is happening more and more places as they try and stop this going forward, is a concern. But I want to go back to the numbers and the fact that all we hear are the number of people with COVID deaths, but we fail to hear the number of other people that are dying. We've had 20, I think they said 27,000 people die last year in Alberta total. And I didn't get the numbers this morning, but I think 900 of those were from COVID. Well, what about the other 26,000? Is there a bigger problem out there? And I would say there is. Is substance abuse going up? I would say it probably is. Are suicides going up? I know that they have some reports saying that it hasn't, but I'm sorry, I question that. It's very interesting on some of the other reports that you read is that heart attacks are down, strokes are down, everything is down that's had years and years of pretty consistent graph going up, the number of heart attacks that are dying, the number of people with breathing disorders, the number of people with kidney failure. It's pretty static and growing at a very predictable rate. But yet, for some reason, many of the reports this year show that they're all down, but COVID is the killer. And it's just not true. Heart attacks will remain the same. And whatever the numbers are, if they actually had proper reporting, you would see that it would be the same as last year. These numbers don't fluctuate like they're pretending and declaring they are, and it's COVID. It's amazing that we've had all these vaccinations and they say they need to change them every year for the flu shots and how the efficacy of them are, what percentage of people don't get them, what do get them. And yet this year now that there is no flu for the first time in my lifetime, there's no flu, there's just COVID. They haven't detected a case of the flu. Well, common sense tells you that these people aren't looking and tracing for the right thing, and they're blaming everything and anything on COVID, and the rest of the world, it's fine. And so I want to go back to the people, not the numbers. And I heard of one town where they have 20, well, I guess it was Lethbridge yesterday. I spoke at the Freedom Rally in Lethbridge yesterday, and the one person there said there's only 20 businesses in Lethbridge that have been completely shut down, physical fitness places, hairdressers, and some restaurants that just can't do takeouts. And again, I think that number is probably inaccurate, but 20 businesses shut down in Lethbridge. Do you really have the ability to get your mind to wrap around that idea that Lethbridge is now safe and we're not going to have the problem of the transmissions because they've shut down 20 personal businesses that only have a few people that come through every day compared to the masses at Costco and Walmart and the grocery stores? It's just unprecedented and it's unbelievable. Just seeing here, better switch over to the comments here. I get going and miss that, but I don't know, David, if you want to point some out and paste them in my personal one there. Maybe that's what you should do, David, is if you want to pick out the best comments or questions and just paste them into our chat, then I won't have to scroll through to look for them. But anyways, this idea that somehow it's the good of society we do not have 20 deaths in Lethbridge. But I can tell you the ramifications for these 20 businesses and their employees is huge. And this is where it's not about the individual. And what disturbed me the most with Premier Kenney's discussion is that he told Danielle on Monday that my job as the Premier is to ensure that the healthcare system doesn't collapse. That he needs to protect the healthcare system, and if doing so causes deaths that they're not going to report, and again, he didn't say this, I'm saying this now, that's okay. And I'm going to go back to talking about the paramedics. I spoke with one last night again, and the individual's grandparent was looking after their child. They're supposed to be off work at 6:30. Again, this is someone that was in a rural town outside of Calgary. They had to run somebody to the hospital. Long story short, 4 hours sitting in the hallway with that individual and not able to go back to their rural town and go home, pick up their child who's being looked after. And they say that it's about the numbers and saving people. Well, our healthcare system has been stressed for years. We talked about paramedics and the fact that for years, paramedics spend thousands and thousands of hours sitting in the hallway in hospitals. And yet our premier says is that that's how we protect our integrity of our healthcare system, by not admitting them into the tertiary care units, having them sit in hallways, telling them to go home. And it's wrong. And we need to actually have these people to be able to get into a hospital and not have to sit there and wait to be treated or seen by a doctor for hours and hours. And it's a problem. But again, going back to these individuals, these 20 businesses in Lethbridge, and I don't know how many employees they have, and I don't know the well-being of how many individuals that aren't able to go and to work out or to get their hair cut, or just that important. And again, I would have to say of the people that I know, not being able to go to the gym and to work out is causing stress for people. Their health is at risk, and they need that out. But yet we don't talk about those numbers. And again, those numbers, I believe, are going to be long term. We've been struggling for years here in the province with mental health, and we're going to compound that problem. We don't have enough people in the mental health care system to handle the numbers. And so by shutting us down so that the hospitals aren't overrun, so that people have long-term mental issues, is a real problem. And I guess the one thing, and it's amazing when you get talking here, what really triggered this and why I wanted to talk about the lockdowns again today was because, and again, I lose track of the days, but on Monday, or was it Tuesday, Ralph Klein's niece in Innisfail was opening up her barber shop. And she absolutely needed to do this financially, in very tough situation, and people rallied to come. Uh, People were free to go there on their own. They lined up outside, and they again, it's fascinating how they could line up outside of Best Buy on Boxing Day, and they can line up in other stores, but you can't line up to go one-on-one to go into a barber shop. And this is problematic, and this is where their thinking is wrong, and where they talk about the good for society. I'm going to say that actually the sacrifice that we need to make, those people that are the working well, that the healthy ones, that the people that feel that their risk is nominal and they're willing to go out, they're going to expose themselves, they're going to develop that herd immunity that is so desperately needed in this, is critical. And I think that the actual sacrifice for society should be that those that are daring enough to go out and to participate in the economy should be allowed to. And if this young lady, and again, I knew Premier Klein, I had a world of respect for him, didn't always agree with everything he had to say, but he was there for the people, the individual. That's who he was concerned about. I loved his Henry and Martha stories, and I'm going to start going back and talking about Henry and Martha and those seniors in Alberta and what they need. But Premier Klein is rolling over in his grave today to think that his niece is being shut down in our province of Alberta and can't conduct business because Dr. Henshaw and Premier Kenney know better and say, this is the root of our problem. This is where the pain is going to be. It's wrong, it's unacceptable, and I feel that it's our duty to continue to push and say no to this. And so what can we do? Well, last week I started an email list, automatic email that you just had to put your name in there, and then you could fire it off, and it would go to the MLA in the Premier's office. And I'm asking you again that we need to do this. I have been told by pretty good, what would I say, a pretty good source that Premier Kenney numbers are going down. And what he's worried about is that he hasn't been tough enough. And there's been more people writing in and complaining that we're not locking down tough enough. And I think the polls show that 54% of Albertans think this lockdown is essential and for the good of society. And I would say those 54%, all of them, their lives are not affected by a shutdown. They're going to get their paycheck. They get to work at home. And they're not able to see, comprehend, or have even empathy for those people that can't do that, that are running a restaurant, that are running a barbershop, physical fitness facility. They don't understand it and they can't relate to them because they're safe and they're comfortable in their home. And this is unacceptable. And so I need you to go to my website, paulhidman.com, tell Kenney to end the lockdown. But more important, where the pressure needs to come, and again, I realize that rural Alberta and the city, we have different geographical situations, and I realize that in the cities and the more dense population that it is more of a problem, but to shut down and to kill rural Alberta is wrong. And I use the analogy that we're at the mercy of an individual who's strangling us, and we just think, well, if we don't fight back, perhaps he'll let us live and then he'll let go. Well, we need to fight back. I don't know that they're going to let go, and too many people have lost their businesses. So we need to send an email, call your MLA, phone your MLA, send an email, send a letter, but we need to contact them and we need to tell them to end the lockdown. And the most important thing that rural MLAs can do, and any of those in the city, because we've got the city ones that went off on their holidays as well, and obviously felt that the risk wasn't there for them, so it's not there for us either, that they need to step out and tell Premier Kenney that we're no longer going to be part of a caucus that has this draconian lockdown, and the long-term damage that they're doing is far greater than what the virus is and has done. And they need to sit as independents, go to the speaker. Nathan Cooper actually sent out a letter saying that he's not agreeing with this. Nathan, you could sit as an independent, and all of you who, if you don't want to be part of the problem and imposing, I want to say actually causing this pain to the people, then you need to go to the speaker and you need to tell them and urge your MLAs to do this, to sit as an independent until two things happen. One, the lockdown ends, and two, the Premier recognizes and says, we will respect recall. If 20,000 people voted in the last election in a riding, 10,001 signatures, we'll recognize recall and we will be accountable to the people. We'll stop listening to the so-called scientists, the experts, who they do know their stuff on their little narrow area. They don't see the big picture. They don't see the damages that are happening to Albertans as a whole, the happening to children, that their lives being taken away, the taking away their individualism by putting a mask over their face so that they can't see the full face and communicate with people and see facial expressions. All of these things are very damaging, and we need to continue to bombard the Premier's office and MLA's office with more people that say end the lockdowns than those that are phoning in and emailing and saying, please continue the lockdowns. This has turned into a political battle, and it shouldn't. Individual life freedoms, property, and pursuit of happiness is what the government should be protecting, not the integrity of our healthcare system. And this idea that we are just going to look at the numbers and we got to go from 0.9 to 0.8. And so what they're saying is if there's 100 sick people, they only want 90 people to get sick. They actually want the transmission to go down to 80 people, and then they feel that's okay. They're off base, and we need to let them know that no, this shutdown, this lockdown is doing more harm than the virus. Its long-term effects, the mental health of Albertans and the economy of Albertan is at risk. And a lot of people say, oh, it's all about the economy. It's all about the economy. Well, it's interesting that if you look at quality of life, health, and lifespan, it's the economy that has the biggest correlation to that than anything else. If you have a strong, vibrant, healthy economy, you have a strong, healthy, vibrant population. If your economy is weak, your population is weak. Social violence goes up, stealing goes up. There's all kinds of correlation between poor lifestyle and a poor economy. Go to Venezuela. I guess that's the other thing when we talk about the numbers. It's so disappointing to me, the number of people that say, oh, if we're only more like Venezuela, if we're only more like North Korea or China. These people have no idea what it's like to live in those areas. And again, the oppression that you cannot speak out, let alone do something that goes against the dictates of the leadership. And this is what's happening. But anyways, David, is there any questions that I need to comment on that you can paste into the private chat? But I just think that we need to continue to bombard the offices with emails. If you want the lockdown to end, if you want people's lives to try to come back to normal, please send the emails. Go to our webpage and click on that, and let's try to recover from this. There is no question that the damage that's happening and these kids that are being put in their position of being told they're in trouble is wrong. But here's a question. Please address the dangers of the unproven vaccines that is very mass produced from big pharma and possibly out of the very lab that the so-called virus came from. Well, there's absolutely no question that in the rush to see that the only way to get herd immunity is to rush this vaccine out and to vaccinate people, and they haven't done the proper normal testing that takes a long time. Usually, you know, we're talking 4 years for these vaccines. The pharmaceuticals have absolutely been says you won't be held liable for any side effects or damages, so please just get us the vaccination. It's interesting that if you actually go back historically, and again, we've switched to the messenger RNA, which is a new type of vaccination. And when you look at the history of that and what they've tried to prove in the past with this, and I realize this is a new one, but the last time they tried to do a messenger RNA and they used the animal testing for that, that when the animals actually got exposed to the real virus, they died. And that's concerning to many people. In the, can't believe I can't think of the name. Anyways, in the one, if you read in the report, I haven't read it personally, but I trust the sources that have given it to me. It says right in there, if you are thinking of having children, it might be best not to get the vaccination if you're a woman, and it actually recommends that men collect their sperm and freeze it just for that safety. But the bottom line is that this is an unknown, untested vaccine. All of them are, and we're the guinea pigs. And what falls of this, we don't know. These companies have been making vaccines for years, but again, a lot of this is new technology and different, and we don't know the long-term effect. And again, I think the most important thing here is that for people who are nervous, they shouldn't have to be getting this vaccination. We shouldn't be allowing companies to say, well, if you're not vaccinated, you can't come to work here or you can't enter here. And I think the Premier needs to be very clear on that. He has failed to do that. But the vaccination is a concern. I hear from at least 1 out of every 5 or 20% of Albertans say they do not want to take the vaccine. I'm one of those. I have no desire to do that. I believe in our immune system. And it's interesting that, if you go back to November last year in the World Health Organization, they talk about herd immunity, and there's two ways of doing that. Is the population just being generally exposed, and those, 70-80% of people will develop that herd immunity and then protect the other 20% that aren't so capable, or to get a vaccination. And now when you look in there for herd immunity, all they talk about is vaccination. And I think that's wrong. We should be free to choose and decide on our own. And those that want to expose themselves, or to be unprotected, and again, they're doing the things that they believe. They're taking their vitamin D, their vitamins, they're perhaps taking zinc. Let the people carry on and choose the risk, whether the risk of being exposed to the virus is a bigger concern to them, or a risk of taking the vaccination. But anyways, I just want to appreciate each and every one of you that are rising to the occasion and standing up. The sacrifice that we need to make as freedom fighters and Alberta patriots is to speak out. If we don't voice our concerns and send in those emails and the phone calls, the other side is winning the battle. There's more of them, but we respect those people. Anybody who wants to isolate and stay home, we'll let them. But you need to let us, those of us who are working well, to be able to go out and to work and make a living, and to associate and to do the sports, let our kids have more things. Says David said he's going to put up another question here, but it's up to us. And if we don't stand up and speak out, this lockdown is going to continue. There's going to be more variants that come in, and we've drawn this new line where it's not about the people, it's about the integrity of our healthcare system, and the billions and billions of dollars that we're spending and haven't addressed and boosted our healthcare facilities. It's become criminal to me. It's just wrong that paramedics sit in the hallway. It's wrong that they send people home. It's wrong that they're not allowing doctors to look around the world and seeing the different protocols that are working, whether it's ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, dexamethasone. There's people that come to the hospital and they say, oh, go home. And if you get, where you can't breathe, then come back. This is wrong. We should be treating these people. Early intervention has shown that this reduces the death and increases the health of the individuals. David, do you have another one for the screen there? Or can you talk about the future of healthcare after the pandemic? Okay. Thank you, BJ, for sending that in. What is the future? Well, under the UPC, I don't think anything's going to change, but except for that there'll be more pressure because of the number of people that they've stressed out. They don't want to work there anymore. We haven't addressed the problems with our healthcare system. And again, I've talked many times about it. The Wildrose government, what we would be doing is canceling the global funding. Currently, these hospitals are given global funding, and every patient that comes in is a cost to them, and it's an expense, and so they try and reduce it. Another thing that we would change as a Wildrose is immediately upon someone arriving at the hospital, whether it's privately through someone bringing them to emergency, or whether it's the paramedics, the hospital is responsible for that individual that's arrived there. They can't say that, oh, we haven't admitted you yet, therefore we're not responsible for you, and that death or that whatever happens isn't on the hospital. It's wrong. We need accountability of those hospitals. We need to, and again, some people have brought it up, and I failed to talk about that. But in the old days when I was young, and for some reason I remember it's my second child, I remember getting my yearly statement and the expenses and what it cost. And Albertans need to know. We have no idea. How much does it cost when you've gone to the emergency and got an x-ray versus if you've ever been able to go to a walk-in clinic or your doctor's office and get an x-ray? We have no idea of the cost. And we need to let Albertans be aware of it. And there's two reasons for that. One, when conscientious Albertan receives that, wow, Didn't know that it cost $250 to get an x-ray at emergency versus $50. And I don't know the numbers. We don't see them at the doctor's clinic. We should see and we should know that. I was always upset when they fired Duckett, the cookie monster, oh, I can't answer to you, I'm eating the cookie. That his expertise was to actually drill down and find the cost of each procedure that goes on in a hospital. We severed him, and again, we're seeing this again where people are losing their jobs because they went on vacation or whatever, and we're firing these CEOs. And the St. Joseph's individuals got $1.1 million. They shouldn't have fired him. They should put him into a room and make him perform some sort of work for the next 2 years and give him his notice. In 2 years you're going to go. But let's get something out of these people. But Duckett, he should have been employed, and we should have known the cost of every procedure from every hospital, whether the MRI in Edmonton is costing $1,300 at that facility versus $1,100 in Calgary, and maybe $950 in Lethbridge. But we need to know the costs. We need to know the numbers, and those should be out there. But under the current system, BJ, I think you're going to see a continued collapse of the healthcare system. The morale of the system is deteriorating, and we don't show our appreciation for frontline workers, and the pressure that we're putting on them, and the whole system is broken and dysfunctional. But I don't see any change. They're going to continue fighting with frontline rather than supporting them, and management in the middle is a huge problem, and it needs to be changed. But I hope that answers your questions. Here's another one. Why are businesses enforcing a bylaw, and some will not allow people in that have legitimate mask exemptions? They say it's their policy. Well, thank you, Betty. Excellent question. And again, when it's a private business, to me, I actually think they have that right. And if they want to say you can't come in here without a mask, they can. They have that right because it's a private business. I mean, but if you're going into a library, or if you're going into some public place, you need to go to City Hall to pay a ticket or something, that's where they shouldn't have that. But the big thing is that those businesses, they need to realize that there's going to be repercussions of that. And again, we just need to get it out. I talked to one lady that actually has a mask exemption. She had a stroke earlier this year, and the place was very belligerent and called the police on her because she wouldn't put on a mask. And I'm pretty sure that she showed them her mask exemption. And again, you don't have to. Your health concerns are private, and they are to respect you when you say that. But I can understand. And to me, if I had a mask exemption, I would show it to comfort the people that you're not just being deceitful about it. But it's wrong. And again, but it's because of the hysteria and the fear mongering that's going on. And these people are paranoid that their business is going to be shut down. If they get an outbreak and one of their staff gets tested, that they are fearful of their future. And again, like I say, if people really believe that the mask is going to save them, and again, the mask, the lockdowns, that they haven't. The virus is out there, and it continues to get around, and it doesn't take a virus 15 minutes, in my opinion, to infect somebody. The viral load is critical, and again, our own immune system is critical. But this is the fear mongering, and why we're not able to get back to the normal, because of that fear and people afraid to do it. But David, are there more questions? I hope I answered that. Should the function of the healthcare system rest on the shoulders of the premier or on any politician? Well, ultimately, everything goes back and rests on, and thanks, Eldon, everything goes back and rests on the premier, and it's his job to make sure that they are functioning right. And it's kind of interesting to me. And again, I don't know how much longer I should go on here, because this is just never ending. But we actually had an emergency official that had plans for different pandemics, whether it's a flood, whether it's a fire, whether it's a healthcare issue, and those plans all got thrown out. I think it was Lieutenant Colonel Redmond, if my memory serves me right. And in 2014 was the last updated plan. But if you've been practicing, for example, in a school or in a facility, or you live in an apartment for fire drills, and you have a plan on how you're going to escape, but that plan all of a sudden is, wow, I was going left because that was the closest door, and I can't remember how to get out of here now because my plan was to run there, but the fire's there. um, and you go into panic. And this is what, in my opinion, the premier has done, and politicians around the world have done. Is this fear? Is that I can't have the number of deaths on my watch supersede someone else's. This is all about the numbers and the number of deaths, but um, we actually need to have a pandemic plan. The premier should have those people in place, and then when this hits, those people are running, if you want to call it, the war room. The premier needs to be advised. I appreciate Dr. Henshaw that she says, look, I give the premier the information and he needs to decide. And so it does go back to him. And all of these healthcare issues, it ultimately does go back to the premier, the chief operating officer of our province, and for him to find the right people to run the different areas. And we have the wrong people in there. The bureaucracy is I don't know, it's just it's just bound in its way of thinking, and new people need to look around the world. But a classic example is the number of papers that have been proven on different treatments and the efficacy of ivermectin and hydrochloroquine. Is it 100%? Absolutely not, but neither will the vaccine be. But it's been proven that early intervention with COVID, that these are positive, but it's not at the table. And we do not have enough experts in enough different areas, and all we are focused on is the hospitals, the hospital beds, and COVID, when we're missing all of the other problems that are out there. But ultimately, yes, it is the premier's responsibility, I believe, and he is not doing a good job of finding the professional people to look at the big picture and make the proper decisions. And they're focused on way too narrow of a scope and the integrity of the healthcare system, but they're not doing anything to make it more robust or to increase its capacity. And he also did mention that, well, it would just be terrible if we had to put up field hospitals. Well, no, that's the purpose of field hospitals, is if you actually have a pandemic. Why do we say we have a pandemic, but yet we're not implementing the plan and getting up field hospitals and moving people into those to treat them and helping on that? Uh, Mr. Redmond talked about, in the Army and things, that when there's a terrible job, people volunteer. And it's interesting because individuals, whether they were volunteered or told by their different businesses, when we had the NHL playoffs in Edmonton, those individuals were locked down like for 7 weeks. They went in and formed an isolation group, and people weren't allowed in or out. And I'm pretty sure in Redmond's um, plan is that they would ask healthcare volunteers to come and be part of these field tents, and we could isolate, and people that would come in, and whether they work for 3 weeks in there and then would be able to go out again. But there are different plans out there on how to actually react if a true pandemic got here and we had thousands of people that needed hospitalization, but we're not allowing that. And again, his idea is to shut down the economy and destroy people's lives in other ways that aren't being accounted for. But that's okay, because it's only the COVID deaths that we need to report. 900 COVID deaths, terrible. 25,100 or 26,100 deaths, doesn't matter who they are, why they are, what happened from them, whether it's suicide because their business failed, those numbers don't count. But anyways, I think we've talked long and hard enough. I'm just going to throw out a teaser for what I want to talk about next time, and that's policing and these tickets that they're handing out and the intimidation that the different city officials are doing, and that needs to end. Our policemen should not be out there. We shouldn't have snitch lines, and we'll be talking about that Thursday night is my plan at this point, unless something else comes up. But please go to my website, paulhinman.com. Click on there. We need to keep sending the emails and the communications to end the lockdown. Do not do a blanket lockdown. If there's an area in the northeast of one city, we did it in Brooks, we did it in High River when they had that bad outbreak in the 2 meat plants, and things are back to normal. They did it, but they didn't have to shut down the entire province. And this idea of province-wide is wrong. It's always about the individual with healthcare. We treat the individual areas, and not these blanket dictates that are just destroying people's lives and doing more harm than the virus. But thanks for tuning in. Stand up and speak out, and that's our social duty, is to stop this tyranny and this lockdown harm. Take care, and we'll talk again Thursday night at 7.